Hi guys. For a while now I've been using this little decade resistance box and I really like it. The functionality of it as far as just being able to dial in the resistance you want is really great. But there's is an issue with it that I find, and if we crack it open you can kind of see why it has this issue. But whenever you're measuring the resistance on it, which I mostly actually use this for multimeter verifications, just as a kind of rough resistance check, just to see, auto range, speed, things like that. But I find that the measurements are a little drifty. It takes a while for them to settle, if they even settle. A lot of times, if I'm measuring something with it on the Keithley 192, it'll take, 5-10 minutes for it to settle. And even then, it seems like it'll still just drift really, really slow and never really get to a point where I'm confident enough to say that a measurement that I'm being shown is the actual true measurement. Um, and then there's a few things I can look at, just general build quality. The actual face here isn't square with the enclosure. It's a little crooked. I think you can even see that on camera. It's so bad. The soldering quality, the solder may have a lot to do with the fact that it's a little drifty, but I mean, it's just, when I first opened this is not what I was expecting to see. Is that it's just SMD resistors, and if I can get close enough, maybe focus just right, but the resistors are just stood up on end and then bridged together with a really puny wire, and I hate it. It's not at all what I was expecting. And granted, this was a really cheap box. I think I may have paid 20 bucks for it, but just the build quality and just the overall practicality of it just sucked. I'm not a fan of this thing. So figured what I would do is get one of these little resistance substitution box kits from Elenco. Of course, Elenco has been around a long time, and I mean, they've got a lot of little kits and stuff, and I'm always up for a little bit of soldering, just to keep in practice, and it's always been fun for me to put these kits together. Now, it's not a decade resistance box. You can't type in, you can't roll in the exact resistance that you want. It's just a selectable, a lot of your most common little values are there. So I think it'll be perfectly good for what we want to do with multimeters. We'll do a kind of calibration on it to make sure that we have we know our exact values. We'll use the 6.5 digit meter to get the exact values on it, and basically use it kind of as a resistance standard for testing multimeters and also doing, electronics projects. This is a really handy thing to have just in general for doing electronics projects. So let's kind of see what comes in the box. We'll look at the little instruction manual that it comes with, and we'll put it together. I probably won't sit there and make y'all watch me assemble this whole thing and soldering and stuff. That'll get really boring. I'll just try to hit some key points on it. But let's go ahead and look at the instruction manual. I actually really like the way that Elenco has this laid out, because I mean, the first thing you see here is your BOM, your parts list. It tells you everything you should have. It tells you a little bit about, checking stuff if something is damaged or anything like that. And it gives you all your part numbers and things. That's nice to see right off the bat. But then it also tells you your resistor value, your color codes for your resistors. This is a really great thing to know and to have right up front, especially for somebody like me, because guys, I'm an amateur at this. I don't have this stuff memorized. It's really handy for me to be able to have this right in front of me so I can look at resistors and value them very quickly. And this, I feel, is going to help me learn more than anything, to be able to just grab a resistor and look at it and know the value. It also gives you PCB layout, kind of just pictures to show you what everything's supposed to look like. And also, even right here, it'll tell you, it gives you the color code of the resistors in the BOM and the value right next to it. So you don't actually have to sit here and figure out each resistor. You can just look on this as a little quick cheat sheet. They give you a soldering tutorial. I've looked over it. It looks pretty decent as far as soldering tutorials go, just as a quick little read over. And then, of course, we have the PCB layout and showing the value of all the resistors, what goes where. Just more assembly stuff. And this, I really, really like this, is that they give you basically a calibration sheet for this, so that you can go in and check all your values and actually write them in, so you can refer to this in the future, not only to use it as a, I know that I should be seeing this on my meter, but also you can see if those resistors are drifting any, which is could be a really, really handy thing, especially as this box starts to get old. You know, if you ran a lot of projects through it, you know, maybe something's starting to get weak or something. So I really like having this in here. And then, of course, they give you the schematic diagram of it, which is, I mean, it's a really simple little schematic, but it's still handy, especially for, you know, beginners and amateurs, which is really what Elenco seems to kind of shoot for. You know, it helps you to interpret and see how you can go from a PCB with just a whole bunch of traces on it to this is actually how this thing works. So I'm really liking this instruction manual. And by the way, no, Elenco is not sending me this for free. I've paid for this. This is something that I really wanted to do. Okay, so first off, let's check out the PCB. I like the blue on the white. Underneath is just the green solder mask, but the blue on white silkscreen, it's different a little, and it just is really pleasing to the eye. And you can kind of look at the traces. I'm no expert on what makes a PCB trace great or not, but to me these look really good. You have really nice large pads to solder to, so if you're a beginner, you're not trying to do really, really fine soldering work. The enclosure itself is a pretty sturdy feeling little plastic box. This is where our self-tapping screws are going to go in at. No metal threaded inserts, things like that, and I really wouldn't expect it out of this. This box, really, I want to say, I'll have to look, but I think I paid somewhere in the neighborhood 18, 19 bucks for it. Nothing expensive, you know, and really it just, for the price, it feels really, really good. Really clear silk screen on the plastic. I'm liking it. This is one of the range switches. I believe they're 12 position range switches. Just grabbing it by the knob, they are a little hard to turn, but they have really good indentions, and they really have a positive click whenever they fall into place. So whenever it clicks, you're going to know that you are where you need to be at. And it is actually much easier with the knob on it. I don't know how well this is going to show up in the camera, but you can see, hopefully you can see, that there is a little wiper here that comes down and contacts whichever pin you're selected on, and then this center row here with this single pin that sticks up, that's actually kind of a ring on the inside that it's always in contact with. So this is going to be your common in the middle here, and then these are going to be your actual selections. And the knob itself is kind of one of those more old school knobs. It's got the black with the kind of polished chromy looking end and the big white line in the middle, and I really like it. I've always liked those old school looks on these knobs. This is your 1 to 1000 selector switch. Just a little on off on, basically 2-position little 2-pole switch. I guess 3-position. No, it's 2-position. So on, and it seems really good. It stands off on. It'll stand off on the PCB, and it'll actually solder in on these big outside tabs here to actually lock it in, and then your 3 selection tabs here. And of course, you can't have a resistance box without resistors. They're all half watt, 5% resistors. Really, I mean, as far as resistors go, they look good. They can't say a whole lot about them, but I really think that they are going to be good. We'll test the values of a few of them just to kind of see what we can expect as far as absolute accuracy on this thing. But I think we'll be pretty pleased with it. They do send you some lead-free solder. This is rosin core, 99% tin, 0.7 copper. So no silver in this solder, but it's lead-free. I haven't decided on whether or not I actually want to use this or not. It actually, you can feel it feels really stiff compared to regular solder. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to use this stuff. I think I'll just use the regular solder that I use for everything else. But it is included in the kit. Okay, last but not least, we'll look at the lead wires and alligator clips that come with this. These are so far the only thing that I'm not really a fan of. Not necessarily because they're bad quality. I mean, they're okay. I mean, they're cheap little bitty alligator clips and just some kind of run-of-the-mill wire. It is rated wire. Come on, show me. I see 600 volt, 22 gauge. You know, so a decent wire. But I'm not a fan of being tied to these leads as the only way to connect to this box. So what I'm planning on doing is I've got a few of these 4mm shrouded banana jacks from another project, and I think that I'll actually drill some holes in the side of the box and have some extra wires. I'll put these just to have them, but I think that I'm actually going to wire these in somewhere in the area of the bottom of this box, so that whenever I am using this for checking multimeters, I can just plug right into here and not have to worry about trying to do anything with these wires. It's just something I think it'll make it a little bit more convenient for me. So if that's what floats your boat, you can do it. If not, you don't have to. I really wish that I had some extra of these binding posts, and I may get some of these later on and switch it around, but I think that the banana jacks and having the wires on there is going to be perfect for me. Okay, let's get started assembling this board. And once again, these instructions, I'm loving them. Not only do they have, you know, on the other pages showing you your color code and all that stuff, but even on the assembly sheet itself, it actually tells you which resistor it is, what the value is, and the color code on it. So I mean, they make it really easy to do this stuff. Alright, let's check the value of this resistor. This is supposed to be 4.7K within 5%. Let's see if we can get a color code for you. You might be able to just make out that it is supposed to be yellow, violet, red, gold. There we go. Is that going to show up? I think so. So I've got it hooked up to the Keithy 192. I've already nulled the leads, so let's see where we're at. 4.64445. We're bouncing around a little bit. Let's see. I might need to adjust the leads a little. Let's make sure we're getting really good contact here. Give it a second to settle. So 4.65. 4.65 looks like that's about where we're going to be at. Actually 502. We carry it all the way out, which is extremely close. You know, that's perfect for me. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll form these leads. What I like to do is just grab it in the middle and just kind of pull down like this. And normally that'll get you extremely close to where you need to be. And this is going to be R12, which goes right here. And we'll push it down and flare the backside out. Okay, it looks like we've only got to do that about 14 more times. 20, actually, 25-ish more times. 470 ohm looks like it's the first one to actually read a little high. It's bumping in at 47965. I believe that's still well within spec, but it's just a little high. Alright, we've got the board populated with just the resistors for now, just to make soldering easier. All of our leads are bent over. So we'll get to soldering. All the resistors I checked, they were well within specs, really close to absolute value. So no worries there. Soldering is just going to be, it's really basic soldering on these things, and it's designed to be that way, you know, with a really large pad. And my iron, for those of you that are worried about it, is going to be set to 650 degrees. I'll be using a chisel tip. I believe this is a 1 millimeter, possibly 2. We can even measure it really quickly. Yeah, it's a 2 millimeter, 1.8, something around that area. I really like this tip for through-hull components. It gets in there really good to make good contact with both the pad and the lead, and really puts the heat in there and lets you solder really quickly. And it should also go without saying, if you're soldering, safety goggles, everything safety here, guys. It seems to be taking a lot to get those pads to wet out. I wonder if they're not a little dirty. Let's try a little bit of extra flux on there to see if we can cook any contaminants off. Not liking the way this thing is soldering. Let's try a little bit of their Elenco solder and see if it's what this stuff wants. No, it seems like it's just sitting on there. We can try a little tip swap. Maybe try a bigger chisel tip. Alright, we've got all of our resistors soldered in. I don't think that it came out too bad. I do believe that I found my first complaint about this Elenco. The pads just don't seem to want to take solder like other kits that I've done before from other manufacturers. It just, maybe it's the size of them. I tried turning my heat up. I tried a bigger chisel tip. I've added flux. I even went so far as to take a brush, a little stainless steel brush, and actually try to clean the pads if there was any corrosion or anything like that on them. I mean, I had my iron turned so far up that some of these pads, I mean, the PCB, the solder mask, actually burned a little bit, and it was just some of them seemed like they soldered really, really well, and others just almost refused to take solder. But all in all, not a bad job. Uh, for somebody who's first time soldering, it's probably going to be a little bit challenging to really get it. I mean, I'm by no means a professional, and it was still a challenge for me, even though I've soldered plenty of times before. So maybe my first minor complaint. I also had a little bit of the solder mask. I don't know if it'll show up in the camera. Actually, kind of bubble a little bit around this pad, and it doesn't show any other heat damage. No marring or scarring like these. This one actually went really, really deep. I was really having some trouble with that pad, and this one was absolutely horrible. But just that little bubbling here too, two little spots, maybe even three. But for ease of soldering so far, I'll give this board 2 out of 5, I would say. 5 being excellent and 1 being unsolderable. So let's move on to some taller components. I think we'll go ahead and probably do the switches now. Switches seem like they're doing a little bit better for soldering. Let's see if that helps. The range switches went a whole lot better. Whenever I'm soldering these are extremely large pads, is that I'll actually have the iron. I'm going to use this pick because my iron's still hot. I'll actually kind of start, and whenever I see the pad itself start taking a little bit of solder, I'll actually begin to rotate my tip around the lead, and that's just to kind of help spread that heat across that pad and give me a little bit more uniform of a tie-in. Because if I just sat here on one side, I could get a really good tie-in on there, and this side could be totally empty and cold. So it just helps to kind of bring that heat around to pull that solder all the way and to really get a good tie-in on there. So you got to bend this tab over here. Go. Both of them are nice and flat now. Alright, we're just going to use the 87 to figure out how to orient the knobs. 0.01 kilo ohms, so that is going to be, let's see, we should be at 1 here. Let's see. A little bit of misalignment on the range switch and the silk screen. Not bad, you can still tell, but there's just a little bit. Well, it looks like we did it right. Alright, so we've got it assembled here, at least as far as factory-wise goes. And I've checked it out with the 87, everything seems good. But before we go to do the calibration on this thing with the Keithley 192, which is going to bring us out to 6.5 digits and give us a really clear picture of exactly what these things look like, I kind of wanted to go over how I'm planning on adding these binding posts. Now I went ahead and actually decided to go ahead to sacrifice the binding posts off my Decade box, and I'll order some and replace that. But just to have these things done today, I'm thinking what I want to do is I've already added the wire in here, and I'll show you just how I did that. But I've just added these two 22 gauge. This is actually some really nice Teflon coated wire that I have a roll of. But I added it to the center tap of that switch, which goes directly to the red wire, and also to the red wire itself. This is actually where the red wire comes up through the PCB. So I've actually got it soldered on 2 points here, and same thing with the black wire side. Is I've actually got the black wire stripped, and it comes up and lays over, and then they're soldered together, and it's kind of tapped into the actual solder pad. And then I've also went ahead and soldered it to, this is a resistor that comes up here. I'm not sure which value it is, but it doesn't matter because all of these are on kind of a common, more or less ground plane is the way they have it set up. So what I'm going to do is solder my little taps to that wire, but before I do all that, we're going to have to figure out where we're going to put these things. And I'm going to have to keep them pretty low in the box, because we can see if we just lay this on here that it actually protrudes a decent way into it. I did think about maybe putting them on the sides here, and I think I could get away with that, but then I'll end up cutting into the silk screen on the cover, or maybe putting them in the middle here, but then I think that'll be a little, yeah, that'll be just too deep. So I really feel like putting them on the sides fairly low is going to be the place for it. And I'll put them equal distance from the sides. And not only that, but what I want to do is actually use these. This is a standard, this is actually a male 4mm jack to male B and C with a little adapter in there. But this is a standard spacing. I believe it's 19mm or 3/4 of an inch for multimeters. Most multimeters are going to use this input jack spacing. And that's what I want to stick to on this. For no particular reason other than that it is a standard. I can't think of any times where it may come in handy, but you never know, and if you can do it, you might as well. So it'll basically be 2 binding posts as low as I can get it, centered, and this 19mm spacing apart. And then of course we'll strip the wires. We'll probably end up cutting the wires down where they'll be a little shorter, but we still are still going to want to have enough room to where we can at least, you know, flip this thing up and out the way if we ever want to get in here to do something, so that we can easily take the wires off of the binding post. And I mean, even that looks kind of long. We may actually bring it down to something about like that. And then we'll actually do our calibration off of the binding post side rather than the alligator clip side, because I feel like more or less what's going to happen the times that I'm really going to want this to be calibrated, to have that calibrated reading, is going to be whenever I'm using it on multimeters to verify measurements. And I think that I'm going to be using the binding post for that. And the alligator side is if I'm ever actually doing electronics projects where I need to substitute a resistor, I think that's when these may come in handy. Or I might even just stick with, you know, trying to use some banana jacks to alligator clips. You know, there's a lot of different options out there, but I really want to have both on this box. So we will work on that. We'll drill some holes in the side of this box, and we'll get that done, and then we'll move on to calibration. Alright, sorry for the kind of funky little camera angle there. Let me see if I can get it a little bit better. There we go. But we've got everything in the screen, so that's good enough. We have the 192 warmed up, and you might have already guessed that these wires are actually to do a 4-wire measurement on the resistance. On the leads for the box, just the little testing leads, I have those not shorted, but clipped together to where they can't short. And right now we're on the 1 mega ohm resistor, and you can see that we're reading a little high. I think what I'll do for right now is actually just go through before I actually fill out the calibration sheet, and we'll just write in what we get on here. So that is now, one thing to bear in mind on this is that I do have the meter in 6.5 digit mode, and 6.5 digit mode is really going to tend to not seem very stable, and that's fine. I mean, you can see even if I just touch the resistor box, it'll jump around. But what we're after really is that these 2 least significant digits here, we're not going to worry about so much. The last one, we're pretty much not going to worry about at all. Once we kind of get some stability on this second one, I think that's when we'll kind of call it. But this last digit, it'll jump around forever, so we're not going to worry so much about it. And after all, a 5.5 digit calibration is far better than this little box was ever actually designed to do. Alright, so I kind of changed tactics a little bit on how I was planning on doing the calibration for this little resistance substitution box. What I ended up coming up with is, in one column here I would write my nominal value, and then since it's using 5% resistors, I went ahead and calculated what the tolerance is for it, whether it be upper or lower. So like for instance, the 10 ohm resistor could be a half a ohm high or low. And then over here I have my red value. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer. There we go. And so from there I was able to calculate, you know, pass, fail. They all actually passed. And then I went just a little step further and I wanted to know how close I actually was in tolerance on this, so that I could know that if I was to use this as kind of a resistance standard, you know, where I would be at on there. And most of them tested really, really well. I believe the farthest out I had was 2.5%, and the best I had was one of them, I believe, was at 0.03%. I think was my best one, but several of them were under 1%. A lot of them were right at 1, some of them, but most of them were under 2. So I think just kind of as a general guideline, I'll use this as a 2% resistance standard, which is really not good enough for most multimeters, but I think just for a quick little gut check to see how close it is, it'll be okay. And if we want to get any more precise than that, we'll actually use the red values here. Other than that, that's pretty much it. My overall, you know, experience with putting together, I think this was my first Elenco kit. I really, really liked it. They did have a little bit of problems with soldering on the pads, which once I kind of tuned the soldering iron a little bit, it got better. It was definitely doable. It wasn't impossible. Not exactly beginner type stuff, but you know, I could live with that. And the only other thing is that I would have preferred to have binding posts come on this rather than just the leads, or not have the leads at all. But all in all, it's a really, really good project. It was really fun to do. It really, I mean, quality wise, as far as the resistors and stuff, they seemed really, really good quality parts. I mean, the range switches, now that it's put together, they're easy to turn, and they click, you know, they really set in, you know, kind of with some authority. The slight little misalignment between the range switches and the actual numbers on the box, that's nothing to me. I mean, that's pretty simple. You know, that may have even been me needing to center the pins in the holes a little bit better or something. So not upset about that at all. All in all, this is a really good project. I would recommend it to anybody who is beginning with electronics. They do have kits that come with soldering irons. I already have soldering irons, so I didn't opt for that one. But something to look into if maybe you don't have a soldering iron, you've never soldered before, and you want to go for that kit. I mean, I see no problems with it. Alright guys, I'll see y'all later.